coolest cars I drove from the 90s. 90s cool cars, really cool. In the 90s, from the 90s, from the 90s. The 5 coolest cars, they were the 5 coolest new cars I drove in the 90s. Previewing RM at Monterey. Yeah, it's the price versus value thing. It's basically to bring a trailer.
All right.
It's just right here. Actually, you won't have to do it, I don't think, this time. Actually, fuck, I don't know. Oh, fuck. Hang on. Oh, shit. It's gonna be through that other control panel thing.
You just want me to get this bugger out of the way.
What's your other? It's in one of them other browsers that you have pulled up.
All these guys. Okay, because
it ain't in them, because I would see the red dot. Well, this was showing us the best. This was showing us the best quality instead of doing it in Discord. But I don't know how to change the screen. Like all I know is I have it working right now. So let me see.
Okay, so we've got the red dot back up. If that's what you. You know what? But no, all I'm asking is when I'm going between.
You don't have to do that no more. We're using this thing now, and this is just sharing your screen no matter what. So yeah, it's like.
So go.
You don't have to do nothing now. Like in terms of that. That's where I got fucked up because I was thinking, oh, well, you're sharing Discord, but you're not, and I can't preview it. If I preview it, it's gonna show the screen. The screen's already started.
Joy, we're gonna work through this as we're going.
I think it's not gonna be an issue. If it's an issue, I'll tell you. Just go through your show.
Okay.
And if you switch browsers, I'm pretty sure it's just gonna switch normal.
So, fine. Okay, because I'll do my introduction, and then so we're gonna start with the let me go there. We're gonna start with cars. Got it. So you see me, correct?
Yeah.
All right. And volume's okay? Or I'm sounding reasonable?
Yeah.
All right. Because now I'm seeing the watch stream screen. Yeah. Let's go. I can hear you just fine through the hallway. Oh, this is gonna be freaking funny. Okay.
Three, two, one. Hang on. And go.
Hey there, aficionados. Winston Goodfellow here. And this weekend's been one crazy ass adventure. So social media manager and good guy, Joey. I flew him out because we wanted to do some upgrading with a lot of our future plans, we'll just say, and which definitely includes these streams. And he's been in town the past few days. Joey, you want to give him a hello? Oh, Joey's not mic'd up. Joey's in the other room. So so Joey says hello. Um, and if you couldn't tell just by this start, this one's going to be a real wing it. We may have a little hiccup here or there, so bear with us because we've got some pretty freaking cool stuff coming. And the fun all started yesterday because we're trying to do streams every Friday, late afternoon, early evening, Pacific Standard Time. And we got a television screen thinking, okay, this is going to be perfect for Joey to use for his supplemental screen. Oh my God, the quality was freaking terrible. It was a Samsung. Now, granted, it wasn't a high-end Samsung, but we thought this was going to rock. And it was horrendous. And then we had some other technical difficulties, so we didn't get on the air yesterday. Went out, got some screens last night, and now we're trying to rock and roll the best we can. And so again, bear with us as we go through our technical experimentation. But where does this lead in today's show? Is we're going to be looking at first. I'm going to talk about value, and we'll pick 3 cars off of Bring a Trailer to discuss that because it's kind of interesting. Then I'm going to hit on the 5 coolest cars I drove from the 1990s, and cool. I don't even know if cool is the right term, but there's some stuff in there on this list that you may never have heard of before, and they were really freaking cool. And then we'll start talking about Monterey Car Week's approaching, less than a month away, and I got a brochure which I'm just going to pull out. Where are you, brochure? Oh God, where did I put the brochure? Oh, there we are. So was this guy, and we'll get into why I think this brochure is fairly important in what is in there, not only in terms of what they're offering, because there's some big boy machinery in there, but also what it's saying about the current status of big boys. And so we'll get into that last and go through, run through the auction. I'll highlight a few cars just to give you some backstory and such on. And so thanks for joining us. And I think what I'm going to do is, so we'll start. We'll start by, actually, I think I'm going to, like I said, I'll start with what were the 5 coolest cars I drove from the 1990s. And I was really debating on what's the word that I want to use. Because at first I was going to do best driving cars, and there was so much stuff. And then maybe most memorable, because memorable can mean something more than just the driving experience. And some of this deals with history. A lot of it is revolved around the driving experience. And okay, I'm now going to call it to Joey in the other room. So, Joey, can we put up the Lamborghini Diablo SE or do you see that on the stream, purple car? Yeah, it's, should I put this over to my large screen or just leave it on my laptop? Because what I'm seeing on my laptop is the Diablo SE. Bingo. So there we got Joey's over to my left.
No, it's showing me the red car.
The red
Ferrari. Can you start with that browser?
Yeah, okay, hang on a sec. So this is where I was talking about we may have issues.
Yeah, we're gonna.
Bingo. Okay, so thanks for hanging in there. This whole week has been an adventure, man. When that thing went sideways yesterday when we were going to try and live stream, and so now we're having some difficulties. But so this was interesting. So here we're talking about value. And I have a question for you. What does value mean to you? And how do you look at value in terms of cars? And whether I'm doing stuff for myself or I'm advising someone, because I can't even say ever. I've just never been a flavor du jour type of guy. Whether it was something I owned or whether it was advising someone on something to purchase. Just because it's hot with other people doesn't mean it should be hot with you. And it's almost like the stock du jour, um, you know. And so when I'm looking at this, I have I actually made a 100-point system on how I value cars. And we'll get into that in a future episode because it's pretty interesting, and it's different from anything I've ever seen. And what a lot of it revolves around is what's been recorded in my backside and my back. And what is it like to drive? Because that for me is such a huge part of owning a collector car. Is I couldn't own a collector car just for appreciation. I have to A, enjoy visually. B, I also look at where was it standing? What did it do in terms of history? Uh, and so that's a big parameter. C is provenance. And then D is the driving experience. And the driving experience can mean several things, of which probably the two primary are what kind of feedback are you getting and how memorable is that experience? Number one. And then number two is where did it stand when it was new in terms of the pecking order of either its contemporaries, its competitors, or even with the type of stuff I drove with the entire market. And then I would compare that to seat time and old things. And my benchmark car, this is kind of crazy, my benchmark car was a Ferrari 250 short wheelbase. And I chose the short wheelbase because, also going back to the old days, we had a pecking order. There was a very distinct pecking order that existed for decades. And we'll get into this sometime in a future episode. You had A-list, B-list, C-list. In the last 10 to 15 years, that pecking order has gone entirely out the window. And I personally think to the detriment of a lot of us. Anyhow, so for me, it was a 250 short wheelbase, which Ferrari made late 50s, early 60s. Built about 150 of them, did them in comp cars, road cars, semi-comp cars, and just a delicious piece of machinery, and in many ways, a landmark car as well as a landmark Ferrari. And on the road, oh man, is that mother fun. And, there's so much stuff today that's faster than it, but they're not as memorable and not as involving in terms of what you experience, what the sounds, the smells, what you hear. It's a brilliant, brilliant machine. So when I'm looking at value, there was a gentleman named Benjamin Graham who was the inventor of value investing in the stock market. And he had, for me, 10 of the best words in terms of investing, which is price is what you pay, value is what you get. And I've never been one who orients towards price is what you pay. I'm always looking towards what's the value you get for the price that you are paying. And so that leads us to this on Bring a Trailer, which sold 2 days ago and for $355,000. And this is kind of some of the fun that Bring a Trailer does. The purchasers do, where they'll often tie either their bids or the price into the car model or a chassis number or something like that. And $355,000 for a 355 GTS. Okay, I get it. It's got 1,300 miles on it. I was blessed because I was testing all of these when they were new. 355 GTS was probably my favorite. And the reason was you could either have a coupe or a convertible, because in this you had the target top. And it was, I should have looked at the production numbers, but from what I'm remembering between the coupe, the Spider, and the GTS, this was by far the most rare. And when I'm looking at this number, 355,000, I'm thinking, okay, is this thing a manual transmission? We scroll down here, and no, it's not. It's a paddle shift. And it's like, good Lord, paying 355 grand. Okay, again, I get it. It's 1,300 miles. I am not an odometer house of worship type of guy. If you like automotive archaeological artifacts, this is a great car to get. Outside of that, and the whole idea of investment grade, I've never really been one who's been big on that term. Anyhow, so, I'm looking at this, 355,000. Okay, Lovely car, great colors, red tan. You can't get more Ferrari than that. Again, paddle shift transmission, uh, and nice thing to drive. But this paddle shift is crude. I remember when these came out, and it's just like, bang, you're getting it hit in the back. And it's not smooth like it was in the 360. And God knows how many other Ferraris, let alone other cars. And the manual tranny on this was wonderful. And so the fact that this turned for 355 when you could get this for probably half the amount. So this is a shot I took at the 599 introduction. This was over in Italy. And this is also paddle shift. But like I said, it's probably going to be 150 to 200. And if you had that low of mileage, okay, the price might go up a little bit. But in terms of driving, in terms of almost everything, for me, there's no comparison between these two cars. Getting a 599 compared to a $350,000 355, there's no comparison. Here's another 355 I drove. And this was a comparison test that I did for Forza. And both these cars had manual transmissions. It was a 599 and a 430, a Bud owned both of them. And he was, if I'm remembering correctly, he was swapping out the 430 for the 599. And it was, interestingly enough, the manual in the 599 for me was almost too light. It was very easy in the throw, and the clutch was really light. It was almost too Americanized. But the whole point is, if I even want to go paddle shift to paddle shift, I'm not even thinking about a 355. I'm getting the 599. Even if they were the same price, I'm getting the 599. The 355, lovely car in terms of a driving experience and what you get. I would even say an ownership experience. I want the 599. Now, if you're a sports car guy, where you like something light, smaller, and nimble, then I kind of get it. But still, that for me was a hefty price to pay. And so price is what you pay, value is what you get. For me, you get much, much more value in a 599. Now we're going to look at another car. We're going to an entirely different segment of the market because this really surprised me. So when I saw this 44,000 mile 1978 Ford Mustang II King Cobra 4-speed, basically the King Cobra package was graphics and cosmetics rather than, okay, we're tweaking suspension and engine and this, that, and the other thing. And if it was tweaked, it wasn't much because I remember this year, and no offense to those of you that like these, because it's not intended to be that. This is me just talking, having driven many Mustangs from all sorts of eras. But these are just, if we scroll down here, and this thing brought $35,000. And it's, the looks are classic for the period. When I look at these, I always think of, in quotes, the Cobras that were on Charlie's Angels. I forget which one of them drove one of those. But that's what this reminds me of. And this is great, man. Look at those seats. You ain't getting held in place while you're cornering or when you're trying to corner. And then I remember even this, like looking at the dashboard where it was like tucking the 3 instruments down here. God, back in 78, that was the coolest thing because you had so many cars that just had the gauges in front of you, which you had the speedometer, obviously, and then it was like a fuel gauge and a temp in one of the receptacles, one of the binnacles. And the fact that this was put here, and then you've got the warning/idiot lights. This is a nice looking car. Again, if you're into automotive archaeological artifacts, I can somewhat understand paying a premium, but paying that price for something, and this is where, again, for me, driving is such a big part of the whole equation. This thing had 139 horsepower out of a 5-liter V8. And these things were anemic, particularly when you compare it to the Mustangs that came beforehand. I remember Road and Track doing the Cobra, where it looked like the GT350 with the blue stripes and the white body and this, that, and the other thing. And it started out where they were driving and a guy pulled up next to him like in a 65 or a 66 GT350. And they took off at the light. And needless to say, the poor Mustang 2 was sucking wind. And So for, in quotes, a performance car, 35 grand for this, 20 grand I could kind of get. And here's why I bring that up, because what else can you get for 35 grand? That's a Mustang. I'd much rather have this. So this is a Celine Parnelli Jones. I tested this when it was new. And oh my God, this car was fabulous. It sounded great. They only made 500. Parnelli Jones was involved. I mean, this for me may have been Steve's best Mustang. A play on the old Boss 302. The Boss hadn't come back yet. But I left this road test shaking my head because the car was so well balanced, and God almighty, it was fun, and it sounded great, and it looked great, and it went like stink. So Celine listed it at 400 horsepower. Whether it hit that or not, but they, if I'm remembering correctly, they massaged the engine, bumped it to 5 liters to make it into, in quotes, a 302. But one car in this, you've got 139 horsepower. In this, you've got 400. And again, it was the balance, the way this thing handled on the road and stopped and went in the gearbox. And, with the differential and everything, the way the rear end gripped, it was brilliant and it sounded great. And this was a car probably 3 years ago, and I'd even still do today, where I was recommending that this was my, I can't say a load up the warehouse car, but it was close, because these offered so much value for the money. And you could buy them high 20s to low 30s. And I had a bud that he and his dad went out and bought a real low mile one. And they love it. They've put a little bit of mileage on it, probably not as much as I thought they would. But they're probably up 10 grand, I'm guessing, in it. Nice little return on the money. Plus, you've got something real nice to look at in the garage, and goes like stink. Again, on the road, this thing was wonderful. And so let's see here. And so here we go. This isn't that long ago. Here's an 8,000 mile Celine Parnelli Jones that sold for 32,000 on Bring a Trailer. And that would probably be a little light today, I would guess. Maybe it's 4 grand higher, 35, 36. But here's an example of, okay, do you want this or do you want that? And for me, there's just no question. I want value for my money, and pristine condition isn't the only thing that's worth value. It's one of the variables, but not the most important. And especially, if we go back to this has less miles by a substantial margin than the other. And so again, when you're looking at buying something, probably the smartest thing you can do is, what am I going to use this for? The second best thing is buy the best you can afford. Don't think you're going to get, look at that project car over there and you can make it mint. That's always going to cost you more than buying the best you can afford. And then the third, and actually the number one lesson, is buy what you like. Everyone gets so caught up in the flavor du jour and this, that, and the other thing, and particularly in the whole supercar market and the expensive end of the market. For me, it's just insane. Get what you like, not what everyone else thinks you should get or what they're getting. Get something that really strikes a chord with you. And who freaking cares? And then if the car appreciates, that's the gravy. And especially if you enjoy driving it, okay, if it goes sideways or goes down, you've had a really enjoyable ownership experience, rather than sweating bullets on, oh my God, is it going to go up in price? Sometimes the market just gets way, 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 way too price centric for me, and I just have to walk away, because I just want to enjoy the cars for what they are. And a Parnelli Jones is a great friggin' drive. You'll be enthralled. Yeah, you can't say that about the Mustang too. I get it. This is a period piece, and it probably brings back nostalgia for some, and that helps them, justify spending $35,000 on an anemic car that actually represents their period in a very interesting way. So value for the money, here it is. Now I'm not going to do any comparisons with the next car. So here's another Bring a Trailer, and I see posts on this with some frequency. So Mercedes SL55. When this came out in 2003, oh my God, the press ran and rave about it. And I was one of them because I was testing this when it was new. And let me see how I've got my shots done here. So this was my SL55. So I had a 2004 that I bought maybe 10 years ago, had it for 18 months, put, I think, 15,000 miles on it. And then it was great because I was talking with my Mercedes mechanic, Chris, a bit ago, and he pulled up this car. So I had it, again, for about a year and a half, like around 15,000 miles. I think I got it with 32,000 on it, and then sold it with 48,000 on it, right around there, maybe 49,000. And mine was a one-owner car. It was local to the area. And I paid, I forget what I paid. But again, this was a number of years ago. But it was like $22,000. And car had a clean Carfax, this, that, and the other thing. These things are really, really good drives. And when this came out, I mean, we all went nuts. This was one of the greatest cars. And so Car and Driver did a comparison test with a Ferrari, an Aston, and a Porsche against this. This won. And that says a lot. And again, I was testing all that stuff at the time. I could tell the greatness of this car is 120, 130,000 when it came out. I paid low 20s. This one here was $15,000. That's friggin' nutso value. Key on these, though, is you really need, because a Mercedes dealership can get expensive. And so if you can find a really good independent shop, it makes the ownership experience a lot easier. So there I am shooting my old car. You know, there was some shots that I took. And this had the same wheels. It was black on black. Again, my mileage was lower, but I had it at 15, 16,000 miles over 18 months. And my total ownership cost was $1,800. So it was just a delightful car. Sounded great, went great, good ride. There was friend Christine driving this thing for my motion shot. And I was hoping I had a couple more shots in here when I was testing this when it was new, and I said I didn't upload those. So, so there's 3 examples of value. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. And the first one, to me, it was just overpriced for what it was and what you could buy for considerably less that would give you a lot more performance and a lot more driving experience. Okay, looks are a subjective thing. Second one was, for me, also somewhat incomprehensible when you can go out and buy a car that's 5-10 times the driving experience of that. And it's also, I'm assuming they made way more King Cobras in the Mustang 2s than Celine did Parnelli Jones. And that equation to me just doesn't make sense. And then thing number 3 is like this is just great value, but you have to understand what you're getting. You should always get a pre-purchase inspection, particularly on something like this, which I did on my car, and it came through with flying colors. And then I'm a big believer in driving them, because for me, the death of a car is to let it sit. And my Mercedes was that was my daily driver for 18 months. And living down in the Southwest, I may be fair-skinned, but back then my heat tolerance isn't quite what it used to be. But I had that thing for 18 months, and I think that top was up for 2 days total. And anyhow, so you doing okay over there, Joey? Okay, because now I'm about to switch screens again. Okay, so my director from behind the scenes is saying we're going to pop up be right back sign. So give us 1 to 2 minutes, and then we'll be right back. And then we'll get into the 5 coolest cars I drove from the 1990s. I heard.
Myself in glass the whole time.
Anybody on?
No, that Marque guy said a few things. It's about the it's about the recording, like I said. We're not paying to promote these, like there's not gonna be many people popping in. I haven't done the Instagram thing at all because quite frankly, there's too much, like we're too close in proximity of everything. Like I need to set it up there and like shut a door, there's no door. Or else to like block the sound out because it echoes. I tried working on it for a whole hour, like the shower and everything. And, you know, it ain't that I'm getting picked up on these mics, I'm getting picked up on your mic in there. The sensitivity thing, it's like, you know, if I put the sensitivity like too high, you know, then people can't hear me. But for me to try to block myself out, I'm 60 minutes, whatever. Purple Lambo tab. Alright. And I can even show you real quick so that, oh no, never mind. Why did you do it back screen each time? Probably. Oh, yeah. Unless I do this. Unless I do this, actually. Alright, so what I'm gonna do, let me pull up that Black Car VOD Ninja. I'm gonna just pull this tab out. How do I send it on over to that other?
You gotta keep scrolling, pushing it over. There it goes.
Alright. 80 anyways. Oh, you don't have to share screen here to just audio here.
Okay,
You should be able to go back to your purple Lambo thing.
got it. Yeah, the Lambo's up. Hang just one sec. I'm seeing something video. Yeah. Okay, aficionados. Look, I was gonna say the ship was sinking and taking on water, but that's too dramatic. So here we are. So now let me rattle through the 5 coolest cars I did and drove in the 1990s. And in today's market, this is going to be interesting. Would these things offer value or not, relating to our previous segment? And that's a good question because you'll see there's some weird friggin' stuff in this thing. So here we're looking at the Diablo SC. So I'm going to put, and this is in no particular order, but is for the 5 coolest, most, and I might even use the word most memorable cars I drove in the 1990s. I'm going with a Diablo SC. This has always been my favorite Diablo model because they're just a little bit raw. And this was shot over near the factory, 93, 94. Let's see what we got here. So this was, I think, the second time I drove it, where we decided to do a comparison test between a Miura SV and a Diablo SC to kind of see how far the bar had moved in terms of performance and the sensations you got with Lamborghini. And with most people thinking that the Miura was the all-time great Lamborghini, which I probably still would, but the Countach LP400 is really the one that set the template, going from 1973 forward, and with the prototype LP500 coming out in 71. And by the way, that car was always meant to go into production. I've spoken with the creators long ago. That's for another stream, or we may do a little deep dive into early Countach history. And if you like that idea, just let me know in the comments, and then I'll bump it up in terms of getting a stream on it where we can really kind of get into it, and then maybe get a guest on who's a restorer or something like that, so that you can find out about the ownership experience. I've been blessed, to drive these things. And yes, I have owned 2 Lamborghinis, and a Solero 400 GTS, and then an LP 400 that was a documented factory hot rod, but for another time. So, going back to the Diablo SC, just love this thing. The way it went, how it sounded, again, the sensations you felt, and I loved the purple paint on it, and just the subtle differentiation on it from the normal model where you had the slats on the back and the wing, and it's just, classic Gandini wedge design. And so this is actually kind of fun, and this is another reason why this is pretty memorable, which is, so during the comparison test, I'm standing out in a field, and Valentino is in the Miura, and I think it was Moreno that was driving the Diablo SC. And they're going back and forth. It's a 2-lane road, 1 lane each way, out in the middle of the country, San Agata area. And they're going back and forth like at 30 miles an hour. And I'm standing out in the field, and after like the 3rd or 4th pass, all of a sudden they aren't coming back anymore. And I'm thinking, huh? And then it kind of dawned on me and thought, oh, we may have a problem here. And so I went out to the road, looked to the left, and it's just like, yes, we did have a problem. And here it was. They got pulled over by the Carabinieri. The Carabinieri are basically the local police, and some old farmer had called on them and said these 2 cars are racing. No, they weren't racing. They weren't doing anything stupid. But it's just when you had these real old world guys in close proximity to a company like Lamborghini, they didn't get it. And, here we are kind of on their home turf, even though we weren't, well, I was sort of intruding on someone's field in that I was standing out there, but we weren't messing anything up. Valentino Moreno were being most respectful. But it was funny. So I looked down there as I was saying, and there they are pulled over, and the Carabinieri car is out in the middle of the road. And here's Valentino. And maybe we'll do a segment on this sometime where I really go into this story because it was pretty funny. Long story short, at the end of it, I ended up sending Valentino like 10 copies of the issue. And I even put a sidebar in that this whole ordeal happened. And they gave it to the Carabinieri guy, and he freaking loved it. It was this guy here. So story for another time. If you want me to come back to this and tell you the complete story, please let me know. But the Diablo SC, wonderful, visceral car. And just, oh my God. Yeah, if I was going to have one Diablo, that's it. And these mothers have run in price. These guys have really run in price. Actually, it'll be fun. I'm going to give a shout out to the Quail here, since we were talking about Monterey coming up in the preamble to this episode, because the Quail is doing a feature of Diablos to celebrate, here's this great car that is now getting recognized. And what are they going to have there? 20, 30 of them? I don't know. But I'm really looking forward to that. So that'll be good fun. So first car was the Diablo SC. Second car is, again, probably the most memorable car, the 5 most memorable cars I drove in the 1990s. Second car was this. So this is the Project Vantage Aston Martin. This isn't the Vanquish. This is the prototype, the Project Vantage. And this was a real prototype because you could only drive it 30, 40 miles an hour. You had to go slow. It had a primitive paddle shift transmission in it. And this was real early days of basically, we'll call it the automated manual transmission, where you'd shift the paddle and it was almost like the car was thinking, and then it would slide into gear. But the reason I put this on the list is A, it's friggin' stunning. This to me is an Ian Callum masterpiece. But B, because of what it did to Aston Martin in terms of their history. They had never really gone up market with an entirely new range from the other cars. I mean, you could sort of say it with a DB4 Zagato or some of the one-off stuff that they did back in the 50s and early 60s. But in terms of modern Aston history, this is really one of the most significant cars there is, because they went from the DB7, then they came out with a DB7 V12, and then bang, this was a big quantum step up. And I remember talking with Bob Dover, the CEO at the time, who was just a delightful guy. Lots of fun, super real car guy, and he got it. And so this was one of his brainchilds, and this vaulted Aston into an entirely different league, and with the production Vanquish, and the production Vanquish looks pretty darn close to this. So this is again my second most memorable car from the 1990s, and again, not because of the way it drove, but because of what it represented and how it looked. Just loved the Project Vantage. So here we were talking about early paddle shift transmissions. This was late 1990s. Now I'm going to show you the car you've probably never heard of. That I think is probably the first ever paddle shift transmission on the street, which is this. So this car here is the Ferrari FX. And this one we're definitely going to do a more extended episode on. So if you like Sultan of Brunei history in terms of cars, please let me know in the comments, because then I'll know to expedite getting this thing up and running. An episode devoted to just that, because it was really an interesting time. So in the mid-1990s, my Italian grapevine was going friggin' nuts that there were all these secret cars being made, and nobody knew them, or maybe a guy knew Giuseppe over at that interior shop, and then Federico over at that coach building shop. And I would get the call and just says, you have to come over and see something. Well, I was living on the west coast of America at that time, and just to drop everything to go over and potentially see something wasn't the most practical thing. So my grapevine was going nuts with about all these cars and what was going on behind the scenes. And then there was this mysterious thing called the Ferrari FX. that was like the most exotic and the wildest of them all. And the whole Sultan of Brunei royal family adventure went to the late 1990s. And then the Asian contagion hit, and bang, it stopped just like that. And again, we're going to devote more time to that in a future episode because the whole thing is really, really interesting. So there was this thing out there, this mysterious car called the Ferrari FX. And I went on a multi-year search to try and get one to drive because I was just curious. A, what did it look like? What made it so special? And it was, so this was done by Pininfarina for the Brunei royal family. If memory serves me correctly, this particular car was done for Prince Hakeem. And so here it is. There you're seeing the paddle shift, and one was up, one for upshift, downshift, and this is 1995. This is on a Ferrari 512 TRM. So the M Testarossa, the hottest of the Testarossas, it was on that platform with this unique carbon fiber body. This was all done by Pininfarina for the Sultan of Brunei, the Brunei royal family, and then they did this paddle shift technology, and it had been in Formula One for maybe 4 or 5 years. And then what's really crazy is when you look at this. So this was to activate reverse, but on there was a big W because this transmission was built by Williams. So I thought that was so wild that here you had a Ferrari competitor in Formula One with a transmission built by Williams for this road car that nobody knew existed. And then, oh my God, this leather was so supple. I've never felt leather like this in any other car, including you name whatever high-end Rolls Royce you want. I've never felt anything like this. And this thing was fantastic because when you would shift, it was like the transmission was thinking. It's like, okay, I'm shifting, and then it's like, bang, now it's in gear. And you would almost hear the mechanical gears and everything working, and the sound this thing made with a custom exhaust. Again, we're going to have to get into this in more detail at another time because this was just an extraordinary car from an extraordinary period that was at the center of an extraordinary story. So for me, car number 3 of the 5 most memorable cars I drove that were made in the 1990s was the Ferrari FX, done for the Sultan of Brunei / the Brunei royal family. And then something else that's gonzo crazy that I drove in the 1990s, I tested this new. So this is the Maserati Barchetta Stradale. They made one. In the mid-1990s, Maserati did a one Marque racing series, and so they had the Maserati Barchetta. Then they thought, okay, let's try and make this thing into a road car. And so they did, and this was the Stradale. And the thing was lightweight. Was it 400 horsepower, if I'm remembering correctly, twin turbo V6 in the back, manual transmission. And as you can see here, there ain't no windscreen. So how did you survive this thing? Here were these helmets that you wore while you drove the car. And I don't remember the test driver's name, but we went out and he handed the keys over to me. And I can't remember if it was myself or he that did it, where we went 170 in this thing, going down a 2-lane road, or maybe we both did it, going down a 2-lane road. Here we go. So going down a 2-lane road in Modena amongst these cornfields and such. And we're wearing these helmets, and man, it's just like, thank God you have the strap on, because the hands of God were coming in there from the wind and trying to rip the helmet off your head as you're going along. And this was a fun, extreme little piece. And it was too bad they didn't make any more road cars. But it was lightweight, powerful. The chassis was quite taut, snick gearbox, all that type of stuff. And I forget what the top end on this thing was. But again, we were wearing helmets and doing 170. So it was fun. It was fast. It was very memorable. So there's car number 4 out of the 5 most memorable cars that I drove in the 1990s. And so now we're going to go to some real good weirdness. Like, boy, I'll be curious in your guys and gals comments. Let me know which do you think is more weird? Was it this, or more unusual, or more interesting? The FX done for the Sultan of Brunei, the Ferrari FX done for the Sultan of Brunei, or this, the Isdera Commendatore. So Isdera was a Marque that you can actually see a video on my YouTube channel that I did an interview with a gentleman named Rainier Buchman, and it's called The Real King of Cool. And Rainier, God, what a great guy. So he had this outfit called BB over in Germany in the 70s and 80s, and they made some extraordinary stuff, including this one-off called the CW311, and now I'm going to go a little geeky, which was based on a mid-engine prototype Mercedes from 1969-1970 called the C111, and they projected what if Mercedes had made this into a road car, what would it be like? And so it had an AMG modified 5-liter V8 behind your head, and his partner in crime in making the CW311 was Eberhard Schultz. And Schultz went it off. He thought the car had so much potential. He went off and started his own company called Isdera. And Isdera made a mid-engine roadster first. And then they did, and I'm not even sure how you pronounce it, Imperator or something like that. That was basically the road-going version of the CW311, and it was the I8i or something along those lines. Was in a lot of top speed shootouts, massaged AMG V8, and it was a 175 mile an hour car all day long. And when you read the road tests of that thing, and particularly there was one where Road and Track did a top speed shootout, and I remember Phil Hill and Paul Frere were doing the testing, and they both ranted and raved about how fabulous the Isdera was, the way it was just planted at high speed and the build quality and this, that, and the other thing. Then in the late 80s, from the mid to late 80s and going into the 90s, a new top speed war erupted. And Ferrari came out with a 288 GTO, Porsche came out with a 959. Then Lamborghini started putting 4-valve heads and beefing up the engine. So was 440, 450 horsepower. And now they're all dancing around 180, 185, 190. And then Ferrari came out with the F40 that they said would do 201. And Lamborghini came out with the Diablo and said it would do 202. And all these guys were one-upping each other. And so Schultz is looking at this and saying, okay, I want to play in that game. So he did this, the Commendatore. And this had a Mercedes V12 behind your head, 6-speed gearbox, and it just had this smoke and cool teardrop shape. And so I drove this thing for the good part of a day. Unfortunately, this was mostly for a photo shoot for a great photographer named Evan Klein, who was doing the story that I wrote the story on this. I didn't shoot for once. Evan did his normal bang-up job. And between this, and then I think it's in this image. No, there's our interior. We'll come back to it. There it is, where we were shooting a Vector W8 and the Isdera at the same time. I drove the Isdera. I did not drive the Vector. But going between the two, there was night and day difference in terms of sophistication, in the engineering of the two cars. And the Isdera was just on an entirely different plane. And that's not to denigrate the W8. It's just the Isdera was better. And it was, oh God, this thing was so cool. I mean, I got it, I drove 30 feet and I just thought, okay, this car is really well engineered. Nothing felt loose. Everything was tight. The way the steering responded, the sensitivity of the chassis and the steering here, we'll go back and take a look at the interior because there was this lovely dash, the gearbox, 6-speed gearbox. And then 1993, not that many cars had 6-speed gearbox, and you had this honking V12, Mercedes V12 behind you, and the projected top speed on this was 230. And Schultz wanted to put these into a small production run. And this, it might have been because of economic conditions, maybe it was something else, but this remained a one-off. And this, for me, is not only one of the most memorable, if not coolest cars that I drove in from the 1990s, but it was one of the fastest, and for sure one of the rarest. This may have been the coolest car of the 1990s. I just love this. So which to you? I mean, actually, we can go with kind of with 3 one-offs. So, do you prefer the Isdera? Do you prefer the Maserati Barchetta Stradale or the Ferrari FX? Let me know your thoughts on which would be the most memorable or coolest, or whichever you would like to have in the garage. I'd be really curious. And boy, between the 5, which one would I take? So, going back to the SE, would it be that? Would it be the Aston Martin Project Vantage, because you're getting a prototype that significantly changed Aston Martin's history? Would you do a Ferrari that nobody's ever seen? And this wasn't a one-off. They built 6 of these for the royal family. The Maserati Barchetta Stradale, which is also a one-off, or the Isdera Commendatore with this fantastic teardrop shape. For me, I would probably take the Isdera. That was just, God, what a wonderful car. It's in a great collection. Dude named Philip Serafin. And so let me know your comments and the thoughts below. So
It's the easiest way for me to do it. I'm
Oh.
going to give you the chat that way.
Okay, so Joey, come on, Joey, bring your head in here. So
What's up, everybody?
Yeah.
Sorry about the technical difficulties.
and thanks for hanging in there. You know, see, now I'm looking over the computer screen here. Now I gotta look at you guys there.
I'm literally in there going like this. Next thing you know, I bust a glass. So, anyways.
And it was great because I had to keep on the game face and talking while I'm hearing this glass shatter.
Yeah,
over
you
the
did
other
great.
one.
You did great. And on top of that, we're using like a new thing for higher quality video and audio, but it's kind of messing with Discord. So
Okay.
Mark is chiming in. He was chiming in earlier too.
Oh, you know what? And our vampire
Up
guy,
here.
is this he?
Yep.
Because you were here last time. Hey, man, good to see you. Appreciate
So
you.
if you want to
joining.
start from the top
Yeah.
here, and
Good
then
evening, Winston. Oh, man, yep. I hope you didn't think your Bid Nerds experience was a waste of time. Oh, God, are you kidding? Hey, aficionados, got clued into this site called Bid Nerds, and I'll be coming and joining them at some point soon, probably, where they go through Bring a Trailer, and yeah, these dudes are nerds. I was pretty impressed just going into real geeky stuff. And so they're giving their evaluations on cars where they think they're good deals and this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, and
it was
yeah.
a great show.
it was a really good show.
We
It's
sat there
just
and
like,
watched it for like an hour.
yeah, and it's like, holy Toledo, I might even be out of my depth with these guys. You know, I'm fine talking about this type of stuff. Yeah, and I can talk about Lancia Evos and that type of things. But man, they were going off on some tangents. I'm like, I didn't know that. Anyhow, so if you want a good time, check out Bid Nerds. Let's see what else. You know, you read this.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
It was great having you join in. He just said he went and followed us on Twitch and stuff like that. He chimed in, the Mustang 2s weren't great, but better than people think. They weren't muscle or sports cars, just reliable cruisers. He wanted that blue Dan Gurney Mustang.
So, because, see, that's interesting. I don't know a Dan Gurney Mustang. I know a Dan Gurney Cougar, but not a Dan Gurney Mustang.
Maybe I'll look it up in there. If I find it, we'll send
Okay.
it. Or if you got a link for us, send
Yeah.
it in the chat. So then he's back in, and then so Big Willie chimes in. He says, you were driving a Ferrari at UCR.
Yes. Yeah. Holy Toledo, Big Willie, were you there? I mean, let me know. So this goes back to late 70s, early 80s. And I came into here you go, Mr. Matura here, I came into a small inheritance. What I do, I went out and bought a Ferrari Daytona. And the best part was I drove that mother. I had it for 2 years and put 24,000 miles on it. Wonderful car back in the day. What else we got going on? So Big Willie, let me know if you were there.
Mark says, I'd love to hear the whole story about this Ferrari.
Okay, so on the FX, Mark, yeah, we'll do that in an episode coming up. Maybe we'll do that even before Monterey.
I have no idea what this means. Big Willie says, Winnie is a pally boy. Does that mean anything to you?
Oh, God, no.
All right, motor little bro comes in and says, dude. Mark says, blue cars always look best in my honest opinion. WG the third used 280 on his own private racetrack. That was Big Willie.
Oh, that's interesting. So Highway 280 is up in the Bay Area, and I remember when that thing opened, and it was there was no one on it.
So what about 1980 at UCR?
So 1980 UCR, yes, I was there in UCR. So before that, I went to a junior college that was off of Highway 280. And so using it as a private racetrack, And okay, I'll be curious to hear your guys' story on this, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit at the end of the stream of street racing back in the day. So I had an ISO Grifo, and it was a GL 365, so it's good for 160 miles an hour. And so the ISO was a Ferrari competitor with a very sophisticated proprietary chassis, and had Corvette engines that ISO modified for reliability at high speed, for extended high speed. Anyhow, this was a legit 160 mile an hour car. There aren't that many cars on Highway 280, and it was a sub $10,000 car back in the day. Now it's 300, 800, depending upon which model you get and the condition and all that. And I use it as my daily driver. It was a fantastic car. And I was heading home, and I got in a race with a guy in a 69 Z28. And we're doing 130 because my speedo's at 210 kilometers an hour, and we're going around this turn. And let's see if I can remember. It was it Alpine Road? And it's been so long since I lived there. Anyhow, there was a long on-ramp. We're doing 130. And the guys ahead of me, I know my car's good for 160. And I'm thinking, okay, dude, unless you've dumped mega bucks under your hood, I'm catching you real soon and I'm passing you. And boom, pedals on the metal. We're going around this corner like this. There's a long looping on-ramp coming up like this. And I look over on that on-ramp. Here comes a CHP. And we're doing 130. And I'm thinking, holy crap. And I didn't want to hit the brakes too hard, because if the guy's looking over at me and he sees the nose dip like this, he's going to know something was going on, and he's going to pull me over or pull us both over with the Z28 ahead of me. And so I tapped the brakes well enough to be able to slow the car down, then downshifted into third, like at around 100, to help the cars to do some engine braking, so the nose isn't dipping. And by now the guy's red lights are on. The guy in the Z28 had his brake lights lit up when he saw the cop, which is about the same time I did. And the cop comes shooting on the freeway, boom, pulls him over, and I go by at 70 miles an hour. So who was that said that it was my private racetrack?
That was Big Willie.
Yeah, so Big Willie, yeah, there is a little bit of truth to that. I wasn't friggin' nutso all the time, but we did have fun on 280. Big Willie, let me know in the comments what you did on 280.
So Vampire Bear Mark says, of the three cars, the Isdera looks best. Ferrari will probably be the most desirable. I couldn't imagine having those cars in the viaducts in LA. I'd take the Commendatore too. Motor Little Bro says the Isdera sounds like a pretty impressive car for a one-off.
Motor Little Bro was his name?
Yeah.
So, Motor. Dude, it was just like, it was interesting because I got in the thing, and then you can kind of sense when the gear shift falls right where it should, the way the dash wrapped around the speedometer, or excuse me, the steering wheel here. Let's go back. So the way this was just, everything was perfectly placed, and the seat was comfortable. And then you had the pedals were coming off the floor, and the heel and towing was easy, and the way it rode and the tautness of the package, you could just really, really, really tell this was a car that was done right. So even though I only went 40 miles an hour, and I did have an offer from the owner hey, Philip, if you're out there, I'd like to drive the Isdera again, and we could do a video on it. And boy, would that be fun, because this is a car that really needs to get better known. It was really, really something. And I mean, I'm a pretty good car geek, but when this was thrown at me, it was like, what? Because I knew Isdera, and I knew the other models, and I knew the relation with the CW311, but I had never heard of this. And we'll do a deeper dive on this too. And then I'll pull out, some of the stuff, the Empyrean stuff I found out, or that I found when I was doing research for the article I was writing. Anything else we need to do, Joey?
Dan Gurney Mustang.
Yes. Oh, no, you're right. You're right. He's God. Okay, thank you for the clarification, because when you said Dan Gurney, we were talking Mustang 2s, I was thinking from, the 60s or 70s. That's what I was thinking of, the Marque Cougar Dan Gurney. Yes, they did do a Dan Gurney edition. Celine did do a Dan Gurney edition. You're correct. And then from that came, oh God, what did they call the edition? The Heritage Edition of cars, I think. And I tested one of those, actually brought it over to Arizona for auction week, and then went back, gave them a binder, all my notes and stuff. They were a good group of people. It was fun. And you're right. I think the Dan Gurney was supercharged and the Parnelli Jones was naturally aspirated. I had totally forgotten about that. Real good call. Anything else, Joey?
Nope. You ready to try to switch screens?
Okay, guys, we're gonna go.
No, we're just gonna do it.
Oh,
live.
we're gonna do it live. So here comes Joey.
We trust that you guys ain't gonna judge us.
Yeah.
All right, so we gotta find that one screen, that ninja screen that was hiding behind this one. Maybe it's gonna be down here. Yeah, sharing the window.
Okay.
But we need the whole screen, the whole Google tab. Is this the next one?
Yes. So that would be the next one, but I'll put it over to our first image.
Well, like, can we close
We
these
can
now?
yeah, you can close that out.
All right.
All right, cool. Let me go over to here. All right, there we are. We're ready to go.
Yeah, we are, but we gotta do we gotta find that one screen where, remember how we were switching it?
Yes.
So let me do this with Discord a second.
Hang in there.
Yeah, we'll be right there. Remember, it was like hiding somewhere. Here, what's this? Oh, it's Discord.
Yeah.
Discord.
Can you believe this guy's chewing in my ear?
I'm chewing in their ear too.
Yeah.
So where do they normally go?
Um.
I'm a PC guy.
Yeah.
Not a Mac guy.
It's been interesting because as Joey's been. Let's put it this way: Mac's been in my industry forever, and so that's why I've always been a Mac guy. But man, when you start going to this back end stuff, I'm really understanding why people prefer PCs.
Oh yeah. Really hard to do what we're doing right now across Mac and PC and all the different services that we're using.
Oh, you know what? Oh, no. It was, hang on a sec.
There it is. Thank you. Oh, look at Winston being the savior here. I'm supposed to be the tech guy.
See, this is great. So one of these days, I wore this shirt on purpose today because this says Fight Currency Debasement by Precious Metal. And so we'll actually be seeing this image in our next segment. And and that's got us.
Yeah, I think we just minimized that. And now let me just double check, but I think we're good.
Okay. Yeah. So as I was saying, this is by Fight Currency Debasement by Precious Metal. And 250 GTOs. By the way, I still firmly believe this by Precious Metal, whether it's gold, silver, or four-wheeled. And this is going to be a recurring theme over for as long as I do this. How much of this is brought about by currency debasement? And we're going to do an episode sometime in the future where I'm going to really get into what's going on in the car market. And this is something I'd be interested in hearing your guys' thoughts, either now or when we get into it. But I now have an operating theory of why have current Ferrari supercars and some other stuff just gone ballistic. And it basically revolves around, so in 1971, the dollar went off the gold standard. Then in 2008, 2009, when the Fed started doing all sorts of funny stuff, quantitative easing and this, that, and the other thing with initials that, I don't even remember. And so my hypothesis is this: if you are age basically 45 to 48, maybe even stretching up to 50, and so you basically came of age following 2008, in your life you've never known sound currency. So for that group of individuals, the dollar is simply a medium of exchange and a scorecard. And so that these cars are going ballistic. I think it's just because there's no mentality of the dollar is a store of value. It is just simply a medium of exchange and a scorecard. And then when you have people that are making money on, cryptocurrency or stocks or whatever, where they haven't put in the years and years and years and years to build up a business, where you really start to understand how precious money is. and it's just boom, you get the quick hit. I mean, how many Bitcoin, millionaires and billionaires did we hear about going out and buying Ferraris and Lamborghinis and such because they had the quick hit? And that mentality is extended to today. And so that's my general theory. Anyhow, enough of that. We'll get into that in much greater in a future episode. So I pulled up RM Sotheby's here, and the reason is for a quick preamble, which is, as we all know, Monterey/Car Week is coming up in about 3 weeks. And okay, I'm not sure if this is a badge of honor or just like, are you friggin' nuts? Which is, I've been going for at least 50 years in a row. And yes. Hey, Michael. Oh, Motor Little Bro is Michael Duffy. Oh, Jesus. So Michael knows, Michael knows more than I do. And Michael has seen more than I do, or I have. He's one of the few that has gone and seen a collection over in the Far East. Anyhow, good to hear from you, Michael. Dude, I hope you're well. It's been too long. And I miss you at the old bookstore. Haven't been there in a while, but that was good times. So I've been going to Monterey since the mid 1970s. Back then, just to give you an idea of how it's grown, it was basically a 2-day event. You drove down on Friday, you went there on Friday, you checked into your hotel. Saturday, you went out to Laguna Seca to the track. Sunday, you went to Pebble Beach. Sunday night, you went home. And it was clean, it was simple. And then you have car clubs starting to get involved, and then other ancillary events started coming in. And the anchor to everything was always the Pebble Beach Concours. And then in the mid 1980s, they started upping their game. And I remember, I think it was 86 when they got the Bugatti Royales, the 6 Bugatti Royales together for the first time ever. They had never been together at the Bugatti factory. And so they got them all at Pebble Beach. And then there was a female photographer whose name was, oh God, was it Cindy Lewis? Where she did a fantastic image of the 6 Bugatti Royales there on the 18th green and made it into a poster. And it was brilliant stuff. Then I first became a judge at Pebble in 1989. I was a chief class judge at the age of 31. And that's when they bought the Alfa Romeo Bats, all 3 of them, first time they were together. Guess what was in one of my classes? The Alfa Romeo Bats. And Nuccio Bertoni was there, and it was an interesting time. But by now, you started having car auctions come in, and Rick Cole was doing an auction, and I'm forgetting who else was doing an auction. And then it was Sotheby's, no, it was Christie's. Then did an auction after Pebble Beach, and boom, and that was really kind of a transformative thing, where you started getting these car auctions, and again, you had clubs coming in, and then the concours and the track would often work in concert, and then it just kept expanding. And then by the late 90s, it was like a 4-day week, and now it's the entire week with all these events, and people come from around the world. And actually, one of these days, and maybe even in the next one of the next 2 or 3, where I'm going to go through, okay, guys and gals, this is Monterey 1.0, and I'm going to bring it up to current and really show you how things have changed over the years, and I'll see how many assets I can gather that we can share on the screen. But as we know, it's like these days, the auctions are almost the headlining event, more so than the car, than Pebble and what's going on at the track and stuff. Because what do people talk about most of the time? And if you care to disagree with this, please do so, because I'd love to hear you that you are disagreeing. But typically, it's about the friggin' auction results. And this is what sometimes drives me nuts, is because you're losing sight of, these are actually cars that you can go out and drive. Even like this friggin' McLaren F1 on RM Sotheby's page. And so I thought, over the next few weeks, as we're building up to Monterey, I'll start highlighting some stuff, including give you a real deep dive on how did Monterey become Monterey that we know it as it is today. And so I've loosely previewed the auctions, And this was impressive because at the beginning of all this, now where did I put it? Here it is. What really brought all this up to my consciousness was when I got this flyer from RM Sotheby's. And the reason is when you go into it, here, they're talking about the Sam and Emily Mann collection going up for sale. Sam and Emily Mann, when I was talking earlier in our first segment of how there used to be a pecking order of cars, there was also kind of a pecking order of collectors where there were the big boys. Sam and Emily were part of the big boys, and as you'll see in a moment when we start scrolling through their stuff. These guys won, let me here. Yeah, Sam and Emily, that's, my memory's intact. They won Pebble Beach 4 times. So they got best of show at Pebble 4 times. In 1991, 96, 2002, and 2005. And Sam was real big in pre-war cars. He did have some post-war stuff, but where he really made his mark at Pebble was with pre-war cars. Then if we dig in a little bit further, we come to, where are you in here? There's Sam and Emily again. I'm looking for this page. The Jim Patterson collection. Jim Patterson, another big boy. Jim Patterson has won Pebble Beach. He was won it 3 times. 4 times. 2002, 2010, 2015, 2023. There ain't that many people that even have 2 wins at Pebble, let alone 1. So Pebble's been going since 1950. So, we're basically at year 75. Have 45 people won Pebble Beach. And so this is a real select club. And then there was someone else, the Ray and Bonnie Kinney collection. And so Ray and Bonnie, they contended at Pebble, where they would have a lot of class winners. They never won the grand prize, but they did win best of show elsewhere. And all of a sudden, boom, here's 3 big boys that are liquidating part or all of their collection at the same auction. And so if you're into extreme pre-war stuff, which for me, the term is rolling sculpture, this is your sale. But the real key point is 3 big boys selling at once. We're really seeing a transition. And, everyone talks about the generational shift. Well, here's a real indicator, because we've had big guy over here sell some, big guy over there sell some, but not 3 in one auction. So I give RM Sotheby's a big tip of the hat, which I'm not wearing, for being able to pull all this off and bring all this together. And so if we just start scrolling down this thing, I thought I've got a few cars queued up in here that I would talk about, that I would give a backstory on, either history or something that I had in relation to the car. But, going through here, it's one of these days I'm going to own a Rolls-Royce Corniche. For some reason, I just, the idea of just cruising around in one of those things for a while, living down here in the Southwest where it's sunny, and, I've got the right colored hair and such for bombing around in a Corniche. But this is wild. So looking at the Tucker, let's just click on this for a moment. Let's see, you're going to pop up. There we are. So this was a real interesting story. Preston Tucker was an industrialist back in the 1940s, very successful. Decided he wanted to take on the big 3, big 4, however many. There were a lot of automotive manufacturers in, but he wanted to take them on with an avant-garde car. They built like 50 of them, and then he went under. And there were a lot of people that think, GM or Chrysler or Ford were involved in making sure that he didn't succeed. I don't know the story well enough to be able to answer that. But this thing had a rear engine, and if I remember correctly, it was air-cooled. I mean, this was just a really, really wild car. And so Francis Ford Coppola did a movie called Tucker. And I'm really kind of disappointed in this, because I was staying with Piero Revolta one time, who made the ESO cars that we had talked about a little bit earlier. And I thought, God almighty, I should go see the Tucker movie with him. because then you're seeing an actual car constructor see a movie on an actual car constructor and then just have a conversation afterwards, which would have been really interesting, which unfortunately never happened. But going back down, so Tucker's kind of interesting, keep going here. Now we start getting into some of this. Okay, so here's Jim Patterson collection, Bugatti, Delage, the French stuff. And what's interesting about France is, so really 1930 to 1940, the number one country for design that most people looked to for inspiration or followed was France. And, to me, the Italians in the early 1930s, late 1920s really weren't close to France. But then as the 30s went on, they started really upping their game. And they weren't not quite neck and neck, but, just one run down. And then 47 on, bang, Italy took over, really took over, and left France and everyone else totally in the dust. But it's just when you look at this, I mean, this is extraordinary stuff. So much of this is custom coach work or limited production coach work. And it's Sam and Emily Mann, it's the Patterson collection, and just scrolling down. And if you guys want me to stop on anything, Joey will let me know. But then you get into this Duesenberg. Look at that thing. And, Clark Gable owned it. And Best of Show at Amelia and Meadowbrook. And, this is crazy stuff. This is basically, I don't know if I'd call this the Bugatti Veyron of its day, but it might have been something a little sort of, okay, Joey, you're wandering in here.
Oh, I thought you called me.
Oh, no, I was just saying if anyone was saying anything.
Oh, I thought
I thought
you were trying to show me my future daily driver there.
Yeah, Joey's swimming in the big bucks as if you couldn't tell. So, but just amazing stuff. Where Duesenberg was making these type of things for Hollywood personalities and royalty and all that type of thing. And here you start to see, this is when you were getting into streamlining, and then you had Art Deco design on streamlining became fastbacks. We would call them fastbacks. The Italians would call them Berlinettas. But it's just like, look at that thing. And this is the type of cars that a lot of the big boys had. And it's just, some of these guys I knew, I know Sam and Emily Mann loosely. They might have shown in one of my classes at Pebble, but I would definitely see them in Winner's Circle when I was voting Best of Show back in the day. And, Hispano Suiza, there's, some more interesting stuff from Sam and Emily. Here's, just as if you couldn't tell, they were big into French stuff. Then here's this extraordinary thing. And I'm trying to remember, did this thing win Best of Show? Yes, it did. This car won Best of Show at Pebble. And God, this might have been a year where I was a little torn between this and an 8C 2900 Alpha when voting Best of Show. And I think that was this year. And this is, let's take a look at that side profile. How crazy is that? Teardrop design. And we'll get into the teardrop design in a little bit. But that's just wild. And so I was debating between this and the Alpha. And if memory serves me correctly, I had Wolfgang Edgar along with me when I was judging Best, and he was head of design at Alfa Romeo. And I was just saying, so tell me what you think. And it was fun hearing his feedback where you had, I've got a reasonable eye for design, but when I'm walking along with one of the, a great designer, and then seeing them, there was one year, actually it was the first year I ever roped a well-known designer into being part of my judging team or just cruising with me when I was judging Best of Show. And it was Ian Callum. This is probably about 1998, 99, 2000 at Pebble. And he and I are walking out to the field together. I'm going out to start greeting exhibitors and set my judges loose on what they had to do. And I had Ian to help us guide through the elegance portion of the judging form. And we're walking up to this car that, I had heard some scuttle might contend for Best of Show. And it was a post-war, it may have been a Talbot Lager, like 1948. I forget who the coach builder was. And as I'm walking up to it, I'm thinking, nah, this isn't going to contend. And I'm trying to figure out, what am I seeing? I knew I was seeing something, but something about it just wasn't quite right. And right as I was thinking this, Cal looked over me and said, you know what's wrong with that car? The wheelbase is 2 centimeters too short. And the instant he said that, I knew that's what I was seeing, but I couldn't quite figure it out. And that's why I loved working with professional designers and helping us when we got through the elegance portion. And needless to say, this mother is friggin' elegant. And look at the color and the white walls and the wheels and everything. It's no wonder it won Best of Show in 2005. But this is the type of stuff that the big boys collected. You know, they weren't, so much of today's collecting seems to revolve around modern supercars. Get some friggin' imagination and look back into history. There's a lot more to this than friggin' wedges and mid-engines and going and dihedral doors and 1,200 horsepower or more. God, there's so much history and driving enjoyment you guys are missing out on. It's just, and we'll get into driving, what one of these things is like to drive in a little bit. But in the history, the elegance, it's just, come on, guys, you got to move beyond this. So, Joe, you want me to be in a temper tantrum when you're taking the picture? What's going on here? Okay. Whoops. Where did I just go? Let's go back there like that. We'll go back up here. I accidentally went to a page, to the next page. Let's see. Let me go right back up to the top. Sorry if this is making you dizzy out there. Okay, here we are. So just continue to scroll through. This real early type of stuff. You know, there's some people that really like this, the London to Brighton races and things, because what's so interesting about these, and I haven't driven that many of the real early stuff, is you're just feeling this primitive technology. And it's fascinating feeling it, like when I was talking about driving the Ferrari FX and then the Aston Martin Project Vantage, where with a paddle shift, it's almost like you can feel it thinking as the gears are changing. And on these real early cars, it's exactly like that. You're feeling the big cylinders. You know, they rev to 1,500 RPM or whatever it is. Hey, Michael Duffy, if you're still out there, give me some help here. You'll get it. But so if we just keep scrolling on down, now you get into some more modern some more modern stuff. You know, here's Ford GT, here's classic stuff. Heritage 911. Well, that's kind of an interesting Cayman. Don't know if that would be my taste. Now we're getting into more modern things, the real hypercars. The Solus GT. I think this is actually kind of a cool piece. This thing, because it just looks different. And if I'm remembering correctly, this has tandem seating. And then the Chiron Sport. There's another Bugatti from this period that we'll scroll down to. That would probably be the one car. If I could take home one from this, it would probably be that car from this auction. Then into the McLarens. Here you've got a Valkyrie, Spider, Huayra. Huayras to me were interesting. I was actually blessed because when Horacio came to the U.S. for the first time, they asked me to shoot a Huayra, which we did. Actually, I should do something on that in the future because that was fun, shooting it up in San Francisco of all places, because I wanted to clearly represent, here was this car, and we're not in Europe, it's their first trip ever over to the States. We had to portray it being in the States. Oh man, so they've got a Daytona SP3 going through. This will actually be interesting to see what this goes for. You know, because there was that one that went for 26 million, maybe it was 2 years ago. And the story on that was fascinating because, if I'm remembering correctly, proceeds were going to charity. But the guy that bought it was like in his 80s, and he had hit the home run with his company and wanted to go out. And he, you know, was now a 3 comma club member, meaning he was 1 billion plus. And he just wanted to have one. And he went out and popped and paid 26 million. And, you know, so here now we're going to get a more realistic value. But, you know, their estimate 10 to 12 million. These things, they are, this is really cool. I've always liked these. So, go back down here and let's see here. Aha, now we're going to get into, if I could take home one car from this auction, it would probably be this. I'm just kind of a sucker for the Mistral. there's just something about the design that kind of grabs me. And I don't think I'd want it in red, but they made 40 of them, if I'm remembering correctly. All were pre-sold, so beggars can't be choosers. Uh, but just, God, this would be fun, man. Oh, basically an open top Chiron with a smoking cool body on it. I do like the way this thing looks. So let me know your thought. What's your favorite modern Bugatti? And if there's something on here that tickles your fancy, um, in terms of the cars that we're looking at here. So you're seeing the transition here, where we're going from the big boys, and again, it's three of them selling their part or all of their collection at once, which really is indicative of we're really transitioning into a new era. And then when you mix it with modern supercars, then there was one. Let's see here. So the Koenigsegg. This I wanted to touch on for a moment, and so the Aston Martin DB7 Zagato. This was interesting because if we go to this picture here, bang. So that's the prototype Aston Martin DB7 Zagato that went by the name of Georgia at Zagato. And I had, what happened with this is, so I knew Andrea Zagato well. And really the only time I ever played matchmaker in my life, or one of the very, very, very few times, was between Andrea Zagato and then a gal named Morella Revolta, who was the daughter of Piero Revolta, and I had known them for longer than I knew Andrea, and I just thought those two would hit it off, and they did, and they ended up getting married, so I played matchmaker. And so I knew Andrea well, and we were at Pebble Beach, and it was at the post-Pebble Beach dinner, and I knew Andrea wanted to get back to doing cars for Zagato. And I also knew Ulrich Betz, who was then CEO of Aston Martin. And they didn't really know each other. And so I did the introduction and we chatted for a couple minutes. And then knowing Andrea's desire of wanting to do an Aston, a Zagato Aston, as we were walking away, I turned back to Ulrich and said, "Hey, Uli, you should consider doing a modern Zagato." And he looked at me and he said, "You know what, maybe you're right." And long story short, Andrea and Ulrich Zagato started talking, and boom, out came the DB7 Zagato. And so here we see it at the Zagato plant outside of Milano. And it was interesting because in many ways, Zagato was at the forefront of the current custom coachwork movement. Because, so in the 1990s, the real custom coachwork was being done for the Sultan of Brunei because he didn't have to worry about any laws, any DOT or EPA laws or anything like that. But nobody knew it because Pininfarina was making all this stuff in secret. And so for the public, Zagato started doing things like they did the Raptor Lamborghini, and then they did the Canto and some other things. And then they started the partnership with Zagato, which has been incredibly successful. And so here, boom, here we're inside Zagato as they're making the body and getting it ready to be painted. And, see, this is really a handcrafted car. And I do like these. It's been a while since I've driven one. It's not my favorite Zagato, but I do like them. And now, boom, here we are up in, this was at Gaydon, if I'm remembering correctly. Because Newport Pagnell was, now I'm thinking of Aston Martin factories in England. So excuse me for not explaining myself. So this was at the Gaydon factory in England where the DB7 model line was built, of which the DB7 Zagato was one. And I like this shot just because you had the quarter panels and here you saw the Z on them and there was a Zagato on the production line. And then we go to here, and there was the finishing area. So you see the standard DB7, and you see the DB7 Zagato. Oh God, now this is bringing back some memories because the factory was actually on strike the day I went and took these pictures. So there was hardly anybody inside there. But it was fun seeing this, just seeing, from going from the starting point of A, Georgia, the prototype, then here's how the production looked. So an interesting story behind these. These are really custom-made suits and done by Zagato. All right, so we'll go back up here, and then we're going to go through my scrolling trick again. Sorry if this is making you all dizzy. I'm not sure why it's just not sticking on the one spot. 246, these things have run a bit. Oh, here we go. This is another one I was going to hit on. So the Bizzarini P538. So you hear the name Bizzarini thrown around a lot. And Bizzarini, what's going on? So Bizzarini was this dude. So I took this picture of Giotto. This was, I think, 82. So back in the second half of the 1970s, when I really started getting into cars, I had, I knew of Ferraris, I knew of Maseratis and Lamborghinis, and then I started discovering ISOs, of which there was this guy named Bizzarini who was involved in the engineering of the cars. Well, who's this guy? And so when all this was going on, nobody knew anything. There was no internet to look at. And I remember going up to when Harrah's Automotive Museum, every summer they would throw a huge, car swap meet. And I would just go up there and I would just be going through magazines. And I would sit there looking through magazines for hours, just trying to find some tidbit on ISO, because it was a Marque. I think I had an ISO Revolta at the time, and nobody knew anything. And I was trying to learn. And so this is the old school detective ways of doing things. And so then I found out about this guy named Bizzarini who was involved with ISO. And then I learned he was involved with, other inconsequential cars like this. So if you want to know where this image came from, there's my original image. And so this car here was second at Le Mans in 63, if I'm remembering correctly. And this car here won Daytona in 63. I spent 3 days with this GTO, second best thing I've ever driven. And again, this is to all the modern collectors. Now, granted, they say this still is a pretty substantial penny. But God almighty, drive one of these friggin' things. Sure, it doesn't go as fast as what you own, but this is so much more involving. You'll know, it's insane what driving a 250 GTO is like. It's really the cat's meow. Anyhow, so Bizzarini was the father of the 250 GTO. And then he got involved in the Ferrari walkout, won a group of individuals, and we'll have to do an episode on this. If any of you want me to really dive into the Ferrari walkout purge, whatever you want to call it, that happened in late 61 when a bunch of guys left at once, let me know, and we'll devote maybe even an entire live stream to it, because the companies that came out because of that group of individuals leaving Ferrari, it totally altered the landscape. And so Giotto consulted with Azza, who made the Ferrarina, which became the Azza 1000 GT. He consulted with Lamborghini. He did the original V12 engine. He consulted with ISO to help engineer their chassis, and then did some of the test driving and was incredibly influential in helping them to expedite their car going into production. And then he ended up making his own cars called Bizzarinis. And let me see here. So there we've got the GTO. So here we've got the Bizzarini that most people know, which is the Strada or the GT America. So Giotto built these basically from 1965 to late 68, early 69. And I thought about doing one of my own images. But so this image is from 1967. And it's just, here we've got, our scuba divers with the Bizzarini there. This was shot out in Italy somewhere. And I just thought, this image is pretty cool. So I did that. And what's interesting, talking to Giotto, he told me that this car here, the Bizzarini Strada / GT America, is basically a second generation GTO. It was his way of improving the GTO because he put the engine, and this has a Chevrolet 327 in it, and the engine is basically residing right around here. And to get to the distributor, you're lifting a panel off the top of the dash because it's set so far back. He was doing that for optimal weight distribution, plus with it being set so far back, look at this line here for the aerodynamics. Look at the cant on that windscreen. And when we compare it to the 250 GTO, and I can't go too deep in the weeds or we'll be here all night, but you can see how one kind of morphed into the other. And this was actually done by Scaglietti. The final bodywork was done by Scaglietti after Bizzarrini left, but it was based upon the design that Giotto had originally done. And so there is mid-front engine V8. And so then Giotto did this. He did this, what's called the P538. And so this is chassis number 1. And this was done February of '66, if I'm remembering correctly. And this was going to be his competition car. So P538, what does that mean? Posteriore, meaning rear engine. And then 538 was 5.3 liters for the 327 Corvette, 8 cylinders. So, and this was going to be Giotto's endurance racer because in the mid-1960s, the big boys were all going towards mid-engine. And Giotto knew if he wanted to compete, and he was like Ferrari in that for him, racing was in his blood. That was just what he wanted to do. And it was also, he thought the best way to promote a car or a Marque was through competition. And so his frontline racer was going to be the P538. Ferrari had the P cars, Ford, the GT40, and that was the wave, and he knew it. And so 65, 66, he developed this thing, and so this is chassis number 1. And so this brings us back to, I'm going into all this because there's this. So we'll come back to this in just a moment. But so there's the P538. Then this was interesting because here's the same car 15, 17 years later. I found this car in Switzerland, and it was owned by a guy, if I'm remembering correctly, his name was Hansuli Bucchi. And I forget how he and I first started corresponding, but we found out about each other. And so here was this. And this was the remains of the first car. And I sent Giotto these pictures because I was curious. And so when Giotto was saying, when he was looking at the chassis, oh, yep, there's the square tubing, it wasn't round tubing and blah, blah, blah. And that was on that particular car. So this was a real deal car. And so this was 1981. And so that brings us back to, we'll just go to this picture here. So this was the first. And then the first time out, the guy that was driving this crashed it. And we saw, in quotes, some of the, the leftovers of the car. And it had enough of a shunt that there was another guy who came along, and he was a constructor on the East Coast. Oh God, this is hysterical because now I'm blanking on his name. Anyhow, good racer who had raced GTOs. He knew Giotto, and he said, "Give me one of those, but I wanted in quotes a complete Bizzarrini. I don't want a Chevy." So the second one was built with a Lamborghini V12, and so that car came over to the States. Third car raced at Le Mans '66, and then after the Bizzarrini company went under in the late 1960s, you could go visit Giotto, who was trying to make a living doing anything, and you could ask him to build you a car, which he would. And so he built some P538s. And so this car, just cool friggin' things. I've always liked these. That's a good shot. And so this one was one of the cars he built in the mid-1970s. And what I really like about this is his wife, Rosanna, was also involved in the building of these cars. And he continued to build them up into the 1990s, P538s. I have to admit, I don't know off the top of my head what the final production was, if we can, with those that were made in period, 68 and earlier being the most valuable, and then this shortly after he left, and his hands were on this. So for me, this is a real deal Bizzarini because the man himself constructed it. Wasn't done by his company, but it was built by him where his hands were involved. So this is a real deal Bizzarini, and yeah, not a bad price for a real deal P538, and real interesting piece. There you get a good look at the rear view. Here's the dash. It's just basic and simple. And typically they had 2 seats in it. This one just has the one. But so there's a little backstory on Bizzarini P538s and the man Bizzarini. So we'll go back here. Excuse my scrolling. Joey, we got anybody wanting to talk about anything? Okay. So Joey's going to come on and we'll get caught up on the chat. I'll continue to scroll us down here. And let's see, what else do we got going on here that's interesting? Looking through here. Here we go with, good old Veyron. And then you can never go wrong with a Gullwing, or excuse me, an SL. What you got, Bubba?
Alrighty.
So thanks for hanging in there while we've been sorting out some issues on this end. What do we got?
Oh, not much. Mark stopped in and he said, a fantastic shirt. It's great to have in-house tech support. Wow, 4 wins. The guild has never won first place. This is getting back to some of the stuff you talked about earlier.
Yep.
The Guild of Automotive Restorers, David Granger. Ben stopped in and said, if Sam and Emily are listening, enlisting their cars this year, does it suggest anything to the effect of a potential market shift? Do they sense a shift in wins, so they chose now as the timing? Mark said, I've never driven an Aston. Did you watch Harry Metcalf's new Bizzarini video a week ago? It was shot before Goodwood, but Harry released it for Goodwood.
So I'm assuming that, and so correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that was on the Aperta Lusso, which was the new car, rather than in quotes, one done in period. But no, I didn't. But thank you for giving me the heads up on that. I'll take a look.
Mark said analog is better than digital.
100%.
I agree with that too. I think you and Harry Metcalf would be great friends. Same age bracket and spent your lives in the car world.
Cool.
And then, by the way, Porsche is the ultimate car maker, but I'll always hold the Ferrari GTO in very high esteem.
Boy, see, I'm trying to think. I have driven some Porsches, not that many. Yeah, I appreciate what you said about the GTO, because I was just thinking, is there a Porsche I would take over a GTO? And the answer is no. Because if you start to get into the extreme stuff, 917, 956, 962, and then going up to even modern, just being bluntly honest, that's way beyond my driving capabilities. Yeah, I could go out and put them around. The GTO, at least I can really kind of get the feel of what it can do. But yeah, Porsche, fantastic mark. And they're really masters at doing, in quotes, limited series that really aren't that limited. Speaking of Porsches, nice RS 3.8 there. So Celine S7, God knows I've shot those. The knowing Steve. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, and then we're going to come back up and talk this Bugatti. And that's maybe where I'll close this out. Series 1 cab, driven those. That's good fun. 575, driven that. Here's a newer Zagato. This is actually a pretty good piece, pretty good looking piece. 360 Modena. Boy, I remember when the 360 Modena came out, and I did a comparison test between the 355 and the 360. And boy, did Ferrari do a quantum leap with the 360. It was really astounding. And then also because the paddle shift was now seamless. You didn't get that thunk like you did with the 355s. And just, it was so much faster. And then I was really blown away. But then I started to cool on them a little bit because it was almost too good. And it started to lose that analog flavor. But then when I drove a 360 with a 6-speed, that really kind of brought back my admiration for the car. The Enzo's the Enzo. Man, the prices on these things have certainly run. Okay, Mazda with an Alamano body. Holy Toledo. So I'm looking here at the Ferrari Super Marque. Actually, I'm going to click on this mother. because just for those that don't know what this is, so back in the 1950s, Enzo Ferrari, who was a master marketer, did the Ferrari American Super America series. So the 410 Super America, 400 SA, 400 Super America, and so they revitalized the moniker, the name for this model. And what makes this model interesting is, so this top rotates onto the back, and it was designed by Leonardo Fioravanti, who was Pininfarina stylist. I wonder if they're even going to show it with the rototop going down, or with the rototop open. Here you can kind of see the transparent top. And it was an interesting technology. For me, it was a little gimmicky, but this was kind of the end of the 575 series before they went to the 599. There, I think we're seeing it with the top open. Let's see if we've got a side profile shot. No, maybe not. All right. Now it doesn't look like they're going to do it. And that for me is what's crazy. So that there was one time with Forza where I had the story to do a 3 Daytona Spider shoot. And the owner was very particular, and I understood why. He had 5 Daytona Spiders. And so we picked out 3 of them. We're going to do this shoot on them. And he didn't want to put the tops down. And so I went to Henry, my editor, and I said, dude, if he doesn't want to put the tops down, the thing's a friggin' spider, then I say we don't do this. Then I say we don't do the article. And Henry said, you know what, I agree. So I went back to good old Insane Dane, who was the curator of the collection, and said, okay, dude, here's the gig. They're open air cars. Tops go down or we don't do the article. Long story short, the article got done, tops went down, and they all look great. And, and so on this, where you have a hard top, it's like, come on, rotate it down so we can see. So those that don't know what it looks like can see it with the top open. And Fioravanti was a real, I think he's still alive. God, he was a good designer, and he had a great eye. Let's see what we've got. So here we are, still going. There was, there's that. 275 GTB, a good car. Here we are. I'll come back. Like I said, I'll come back up to our Super Sport. But it's just a real nice mixture. Okay, here I'm going to let you in on a real secret. If you want one of the best bargains in all of the automotive universe, and remember we were talking about earlier, price is what you pay, value is what you get. Here's some of the best value in the automotive universe, a Maserati Bora. I drove one of these that was actually the last Bora made. So when Dave Tomaso bought the Maserati company in 1990, there were enough parts to make a Bora, and so they made one more that ended up in the Panini collection when they took over the Maserati factory collection. And so it was like a 0-mile Bora. Oh my God, I was blown away by how good the car was. This is a car that if I blindfolded you and we took it out for a drive, you would think it was either modern or at the most 5 years old. And it was interesting because this car really made a Boxer and a Countach in particular feel antiquated. It was so refined. And why these things haven't run in price, I think it's probably just because the Countach in particular, but also the Boxer, were more spectacular. They listed the top speed on this at 174. Realistically, it was 160. So the Countach and the Boxer were faster. But God almighty, it's such a good car, and it makes a great noise. It goes well. 0 to 60, 6 seconds. Slick 5-speed gearbox. Just a brilliant, brilliant car. Let's see what else we've got going on here. Mercedes Pullman. Wow, the prices on those dropped. Now that car could need some work. There's F12 Berlinetta, Testarossa. But, here we've got an F40 going on without reserve. I mean, this is a good friggin' auction. Oh, then here you go. Here we've got real prototype stuff. Oh, here's where I want to go. So This is 206 Berlinetta. This is the second Dino made. The 166 was the first one done in 65. Then this was the next step as they moved towards the street car. But there's real deal piece, and this is owned by a collector on the East Coast, if I'm remembering correctly. This is where I wanted to go, and then we'll probably go back up to the Bugatti. So I had talked about the term rolling sculpture, and this is a big boy car from the old days. And what's so wonderful about this, so if you drove this, and then its corresponding car from Italy, which would be the HC 2900, and the corresponding car from the States, which would be a Duesenberg, they all drive so differently. This is just, teardrop. So look at that. And the reason I'm ranting and raving about this is, so this should be bingo. So this is when I shot and drove a teardrop. And I was really kind of enamored with the thing. No, it's not fast in terms of today's parameters, but it was, it's like you could go out and cruise at 80 to 100 miles an hour on the freeway without a problem. And I had a Selectomatic gearbox, which is this little thing that was sticking off the steering column. And it looked like, you had your H pattern in there and a little gear shifter. And if I'm remembering correctly, you lifted off the accelerator, and then you shifted it, then you floored it again. It was almost like a Selectomatic. And there you see it. And so this was shot in a sulfur pit. And I purposely wanted to shoot it in a sulfur pit because this car to me exemplifies rolling sculpture. And it's just like, whoops, I didn't mean to go there. I thought I had another shot. Anyhow, look at the flowing lines on that. That is rolling sculpture. And that's interesting because now that I'm thinking about it, how many cars today would I describe as rolling sculpture? Not many. And I'm trying to think, okay, how many of the supercars / hypercars would I describe as rolling sculpture? Well, there might be something, but it's probably not going to be many, where there's just a certain elegance that goes with it, where it does have a connotation of speed. And this was when aerodynamics were really they were still a black art, and they were really in their formative years. And so they looked at the designers, Fagoni and Falaschi. They were looking at this, and you had the teardrop, which was like the perfect shape in nature. And boom, that was kind of their inspiration for this. When you look at what Carrozzeria Touring and Pininfarina did back in the day, they were also taking inspiration from things like teardrops, and then the way the wind would cut the snow and that type of thing, where Battista Pininfarina would purposely go out and see what was going on in nature for inspiration. And just, this is sculpture, and it rolls. It's fantastic. I keep going back to that. We're coming back to that in just a sec. Where I need to go is over to here. My mistake. And just an exquisite thing. And they all look a little different. This is true custom coach work. And let's see if we can see our bingo. So there's our Selectomatic. I was mistaken, but you can see there are your gears. But it's just like you would slowly go through each gear, and it was kind of a fun way to do it. So it was basically an automatic manual, and a neat piece. So let's go back. All right. I think I'll wrap this up now. And so you saw me going, looking at Bugatti. Let's get down to, here we are, EB110. This is interesting. So I have a term, what I call load up the warehouse car, which is, this to me means it's as close to a can't miss car as you can get. And when these were 200 grand, 225, this is my load up the warehouse car. It made no sense that they dropped that far. And it was at one time the world's fastest car with its quad turbo V12 and all wheel drive. And I was fortunate enough to spend time with Nicola Materazzi, who was the father of the car, spend time with Romano Artioli, who was the pocketbook and the one who basically dreamt this whole thing up, and then went to Maserati Materazzi to make it into reality. And it's just, you know, I was going to say about 130 of these made. No, my mistake, was 139. Um, but you know, Gandini wedge that was then modified by I think it was a friend or a relative of Artioli's, where they massaged it a bit to make it a little less extreme than what Gandini had done. But there's your classic 80s, 90s wedge. And I've always been enamored with these. Um, just because also it's fun when you get the upstart company going against the big boys. And that's what Artioli was doing. And he knew his cars. He really knew his cars. So let me see where we are here. Aha. Now, here's why I was had decided we'd end on the Bugatti. So just to give you an idea of what it was like where these things were built, because there weren't that many pictures taken inside the factory. So here's where you know, so you're driving up to the factory, and here's the Prova plate. So there's a test plate. This car was taken out by a test driver. Boom, you know, hits the intercom or use the card, got on in, and then there's the factory. And then this thing, when you went into this thing, look at that floor. Here's the EB110 production line, and it was just like you could eat off that floor. Artioli went friggin' nuts. He wanted to have really an atelier where they built these extraordinary cars, and it was definitely that. And so this was built in the Campo Galliano, which is a town outside Modena. Gee, what a surprise building in that area. And you know, the engineering talent, the craftsmen that made these things, and this was the interior of the Bugatti factory, and it was just a wonderful place to be. And it was interesting because this is when the whole EB10 adventure was at its zenith. And then it was like 1 or 2 years later when I was at the Geneva show and stopped off at the Bugatti stand, and you could just feel the energy was down. I mean, they knew they were dying, and it was really kind of a tragedy. And Artioli was so into it that when I first met him ever was at the Geneva show. And so I went up and started talking to him, and I handed him my business card. And so we're talking like this. And then he starts fumbling around and he puts on his glasses. I'm kind of going, what are you doing? He says, I want to see what you have on your business card. And he looks down and he says, an ATS. So an ATS is one of those cars that is an offshoot of when I was talking about the Ferrari walkout or the factory purge. ATS was one of the marques that came when the group of engineering and executive talent left Ferrari en masse in late 1961. It was actually at the end of October. And ATS was one of the companies. They only made like 10 cars. And there I am showing Artioli with my business card that has that on it. And he immediately recognized it. And that's when I thought, okay, this guy and I are going to get along pretty well, because he was a true car guy. Totally friggin' into it. So there you get a little bit of a background on Bugatti. And again, not that many people have seen images inside the factory because there really weren't that many shot. And one of these days we'll do a deeper dive into the EB110 because I, needless to say, have more images than that, and I could pull up some stuff on the story, maybe throw in some Geneva images as well, and a little bit on Materazzi and that type of thing. So I'm now turning the floor over to anyone that's out there. Anything you guys and gals care to talk about? Joey, anything that's come in while I've been rambling away here? So, yes. Thank you. Thanks for the compliment. Yes, on roofs. So Joey was giving me about the roof turbo. I've always had a thing for the roof cars, and roof basically takes a Porsche and they disassemble it so much and then reassemble it that he is recognized as a constructor. And earlier I was talking about the Isdera with participating in a road and track top speed shootout. There was in the one they did in 1987, where the Isdera was at. They had a roof there that was the Yellowbird, and this, at least in America, put roof on the map because you had Ferrari there, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Isdera, some other tuners and stuff. And the car that was the fastest, roof Yellowbird, and went 217 miles an hour, blew them all out of the water. And that's when I thought, okay, who's this manufacturer? And I actually have a standing invite to go visit them sometime in Germany, and I should, because I've always been intrigued by that nameplate. So, Mark, I totally get what you're saying about the roofing and how you're enamored with those cars and that nameplate, because they build really, really, really cool stuff. So, anything else we need to know, Joey? All right. So, for those of you that have tuned in, I definitely appreciate it. And we appreciate your patience as we had some fun working through technical difficulties, which started yesterday. So here we are. And I'll see you on the road. And then we'll be coming back to you. We may even try and do 2 live streams this week coming up, because I really would like to do one kind of devoted to Monterey, to give a kind of a background on where everything came from. So thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you on the road.